All right. Now we go to Souda revision.
Yep. Andy, you're on. Scott.
I want to thank Andy again for doing this. You can't do this for all the townships or you'd never be home, I know that.
It might be quicker to list the ones we haven't done it.
Is that right?
But
thanks for doing it.
between zoning and subdivision, we've probably written half of the ordinances. We've been involved in half of them around the county.
Yeah,
So.
very helpful to us. We appreciate it.
So hopefully you still have Article 6.
Yep.
They're the improvement and construction requirements. That one's pretty short, so we hope we want to get through that tonight. And we want to have a very brief conversation about Article 7, which is mobile home parks. And that's more of a question for some feedback before Scott and I go any further. So, and again, like with Section 5 on design standards, Scott and I sat down and discussed a lot of his comments that he added in here as well. So 601 is monuments and markers. Again, it's fairly straightforward. Scott added C there about removal. That basically any of the removed have to be replaced by the surveyor, the expense of the person moving them.
Okay.
The rest of it's fairly straightforward in terms of setting it. The next part, 602, is streets. And God, was this the one that you had the drawings?
This is the one with the exhibits, correct?
Okay. I don't know if we pass out the exhibits before. I'm not sure. I don't know if we did or not.
I don't think so.
No, you got cross sections of the streets.
We'll get those out to you here. But the street section has, let's see, at 602A, I'm just going to covers public streets. B covers private streets. Then we have street lights, street signs, street trees, in the sections that it various sections that it covers. It's the public streets cross references the design, the standards in Article 5. It also refers to the material specs from PennDOT's publications, publication 408 and 70, that establish that. And the other section added, there's going to cut it. What we're talking about there.
Yeah, I'm increasingly seeing this in other townships. They're requiring pavement base drains around inlets. I think it's a little excessive to require them around every inlet, but I think it'd be prudent to require those in areas of high groundwater or areas of deep cut.
I agree.
So what this is it's sort of like a perforated pipe along the edge of each side of the road in the base area where the gravel is, so that any water that sort of percolates up through the ground during a really wet season, it has a way for it to get out instead of collecting there and freezing and thawing and causing uplift and pavement damage.
But when you say, I'm back to how are we defining when it's going to be needed? When you say, what'd you say, significant water?
Yeah, in areas of high groundwater.
What's the definition of high groundwater though? Who's making that decision?
Well, typically it's like within 2 feet of the surface of the ground.
That's what was done in Torway, that repair, right?
Yes, that was part of Tollway Road's improvements.
Okay.
Correct.
Somewhere else.
Except that wasn't just the edge of the road, that was in the ditch line.
engineer has to do that.
Yeah. 'cause under-
Okay.
Out there in the
Yeah, those in, we're not
sand.
gonna like-
All right, well, I'm okay as long as, I'm back to, I like to see something a little more objective than subjective here. But if that's a determination, and that's what Ted was saying.
Well, and in the Adams County Soil Manual, it also defines, it lists areas,
High water.
soils with limitations, including high ground.
Okay, good.
So we can just base it off of that.
Okay, good, that's
All the
great.
soil survey.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I've seen another municipality that where some of the issues like that came up, they had the developer do like core testing and drilling in specific locations to from geotech perspective
Okay.
to document what the conditions were there to say whether it should or shouldn't be required.
And the engineer's making that determination?
Yeah,
Ultimately, after the geotech?
They do the analysis and give it to the municipal engineer
Okay.
to review, to whether it's, they might say, well, the soil says this, but we don't think it applies here, so they have to do the core samplings and whatever, and provide the technical, you go back and forth on it, so.
Okay.
There's other avenues there to pursue it if they think that the actual conditions differ.
Or different than what, yes, okay, good.
The next one talks about private streets.
We don't have private streets.
We have a couple, why do you say we don't have private streets?
Where do we have one? Oh, you got one.
I don't have one, but there's one over in my neighborhood.
Yeah, well, there's a couple others. We don't allow private.
We don't allow new ones, but we do have, whatever we have, 3 or 4, so I
There
know.
off Oxford Road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What's
so.
the difference between a private street and a lane?
4 or 5 people going on.
Did
using the same
someone
access.
construct it and
If it's
Give it a name.
maintained by the township,
township? Okay,
you can call it whatever you want to call a lane, but it's either private or public, that's the distinction.
yeah, okay.
But back to the point. So we have to have, you want to say something about private, we have them, I understand your point, we don't want any more.
Right.
And that's a good policy.
Yeah, you don't want that because they won't all put in the fair.
Was the one
Yeah.
that goes up to Gus Tanger's, is that considered a private street? Or is it a township road?
That's the
Sunset
township road.
Lane.
I mean, it goes up to Gus's and then stops.
It's Sunset Lane.
Township road.
Yeah, that's a town, that's.
I know
that's a
we
township.
plow it,
That's a
I
township.
just wanted to know what the
Where
designation
before?
was.
Oh, way
What
over
if-
the hill.
What if a high-end builder wants to come in and create a gated community? And he wants to be able to maintain his roads and plow them and whatnot.
Well,
I'll
according
give
to
you an
what's in the
example.
zoning
The lake,
ordinance, you can't do that.
the lakes are private streets.
Yeah,
And,
that's a great example.
and this section makes that developer build them according to our current public street standards.
Yes.
Because ultimately, somewhere along the line, they'll get turned back over to the township somewhere down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to have to deal with that
Rebuild, you
issue.
end up rebuilding the thing.
When the
Yeah.
private entity goes bust and.
Yeah.
To give an example, now it's been a decade and a half since we've gotten these calls, but 15 plus years ago, we were regularly getting calls from Bear Mountain
Yeah.
asking, "Hey,
Yeah,
how can we get these streets turned
That's the most
public?"
up there from what I heard. People living up there, that's bad.
Well, that's what
Oh, I've been up there.
That's very
so.
bad.
As an
That's a great
example
Yeah.
of private streets not built to the right.
So
right
I think,
Okay,
what,
I have a question. They're on Old 15 up to Smith's
Body shop.
Body Shop.
Yeah.
There's a couple houses up there.
Mhm.
Is that considered a private street then?
Yes,
Yeah, it was one.
it is.
Is one.
Okay.
There's 3 or 4 houses in there.
Yeah.
There's about
Yeah.
6 houses.
With, plus the business, correct?
okay,
Mhm.
but your
They all
point,
have the same address with A, B, C, and D.
okay, your point is, if we're gonna have them, and right now we don't, but if a developer went, to your question, or whoever's question that was, if a developer comes in and wants to do something, and the supervisors say, that seems like a pretty good idea, we want the private road to meet the conditions that we would have in a public road.
Mhm.
That's your point,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's fine.
Now, whether
you
you
disagree with that?
allow them or not is a policy decision.
yes, But if they're gonna be
if you do
there.
allow them, then they need to be designed to the same specs
Yeah.
as public
Yeah.
ones.
Right.
Yeah,
Township
which
specs.
makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
Yeah.
$10.
Which, to be fair, is usually a barrier from them proposing this
Yes, it is.
privately. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
You go with
Yeah.
normal private.
The worst example is what Hamilton Bend is facing down on Fairfield. That they have all those old logging roads that are now private drives, and they've been massaging their saldo in that section for decades, and going back and forth about what they do and don't want, and it's an absolute mess
Yeah.
down there. So.
Okay. Good point.
Next up, streetlights. And
That's one.
the triggers at, I think it's 30,000 square feet. Average lot size is 30,000 square feet or less. Owned by the property owner or the homeowners association. Street signs that adds references to the appropriate PennDOT publication. And it lays out when developers shall provide, including as part of their high occupancy permit, that they have to conform to the latest uniform traffic control device manual from the feds, and street signs mounted with breakaway posts in accordance with the appropriate PennDOT. It's actually fairly straightforward stuff. Street trees. Some standards for those, and I think
I just recommend changing the interval from 45 feet to every
Yeah.
50 feet. I don't know why someone would pick an interval of 45 feet, but
Yeah.
I like round numbers.
You say 50 feet?
Yeah.
Well, I got 80 feet in mine.
Yeah, so you want 50 there.
Instead of 80.
On
Number
D-
3.
D3.
Number three,
Yeah.
D3.
80 feet minimum lot width.
And their comment is that 80 feet is the minimum lot width per zoning.
Was never 45 that I know of. I mean, I take your point, and even numbers better, but. Did you have 45, Scott?
No. This is a different requirement. It says street trees shall be planted at intervals of not more than 50 feet. Is that a?
Well, it says 45 here.
45.
Yeah.
You want 50.
80.
Yeah, under D
Oh, okay.
streets.
80 and say, I see what you're saying.
Ours we have, yeah, for under D3 it's 80 feet.
Got four. An old one maybe.
All right, so we got 50 feet there.
Yeah, just so here
Well, do we want 80 or 50? How'd it go from 45 to 80?
I think your comment was that the minimum lot width in the ordinance is 80, so that the interval should be
The same as the minimum
80.
lot.
So it's
Consistent.
one tree per
One
lot.
tree.
Yeah,
so
okay.
that
All right,
works out
so we
very
want to
well.
make it 80.
80 then, 80 makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why we made it 80 at some point.
All right.
And then there's some design standards about staggering them so that there's coverage planted outside the right of way, outside the clear sight triangles, and then the table there about depending on the number required, the number of species they have to put in there. We generally dislike putting all of one species in landscaping because if it gets hit with a disease, well, guess what? All of them.
They'll all go.
All of them go.
Like the ash tree.
Yeah, that's a very
That's
popular
prime.
example.
Yep. Wipe them all out.
603 is curbs, and this change basically references the construction in accordance with the appropriate PennDOT publication.
Makes sense.
So that's the only thing that's going to be under curbs.
Right, because again, these get to the construction requirements, not necessarily to do you want them. That stuff that's over in the other section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
This gets
gotcha.
into how are you going to build them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sidewalks is the same thing.
Yep.
Yep.
It's just how they're going to be built.
I assume that section of PennDOT covers ADA requirements and all that, probably. I think.
Yeah. As we had that conversation about the 4-foot width versus 5-foot width and
Yeah.
sidewalks last time.
Right.
605 talks about design for sewer and water supply systems, about private and on-site, things like that. 606 covers fire hydrants. Basically require any development served by municipal water system. Not more than 600 feet apart, locations required by the local fire department. And that they should be subject to review by the local fire department for feedback on those. Others, municipalities where York Water is involved, that's fire hydrants, touchy subject, because the municipalities have to pay for all the fire hydrants per hydrant in there, and York Water Company is not cheap.
Yep.
So there's a tendency to reduce the number of hydrants because it's an expense unless they get a HOA in place that's covering that cost for them. So. Then there is a bunch like stormwater, EMS, and floodplains and things like that. That all got moved to the section Article 5 about design standards. 610 covers underground utility lines, and basically references the PUC. 611 is the same thing, but for petroleum and natural gas lines. 612 is the dedication for recreation component in there. I think there's something like that already in there, so I don't think it's significantly new, but it basically where there's
And you can't set up a rec fund because unless you have a designated area.
there's a study you have to do.
Yeah, you have to do a study and designate this area that the funds go to, and it has to be within a certain circumference, distance from that development.
We have done those. We do that
Yeah.
analysis for municipalities that want it. To be perfectly honest with you, it's if you're a municipality that has a lot of residential development, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
If you're one that has been in single digits of new housing permits for the better part of a decade plus, probably
Multiple
a waste of time.
decades, yeah.
Probably a waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see Latimer, and then was it Mount Pleasant? One of them down there, they just tried to unload. They're trying to unload an old rec area out there. It was given to them as part of the development process.
Oxford.
Yeah. And you'd see little parcels laid aside.
The old tie lot type of thing. Yeah.
Totally useless.
Conolago had a bunch of those.
Yeah.
The last rec fee ordinance we wrote was in Reading Township, and I think the per unit fee came out to something like $600 or $700, something like that. But again, they had something very specific they wanted to do with the funds.
Right.
In there to expand. They wanted to expand the park there in Hampton.
And that was a one-time?
It's so.
Because there's ongoing cost.
Well, so yeah, it's a one-time fee.
Okay.
When new development comes in, they have to pay that at
If
the
a
time
guy
of the
comes
permit.
in
Okay.
and gonna develop 40 lots, he's gonna have to give you a rec fee
Right.
for 40 houses.
The legislature changed the law that used to be you had to give it back if you didn't spend it for 3 years. You had to return it. They changed that so that now that once it's paid, you get to keep it. they've loosened the regs there. But again, it's I'm not
It's not
proposing that here
applicable,
because.
but it should be in here. We have
Yeah. And then last 613 talks about dedication of improvements in financial security. So I don't know there was any. Again, this was streamlined a lot since a lot of the stuff was moved over to the design standards and then just cross-referencing the existing state.
So are we good with section 612 the way it is?
I think so.
Yeah.
You good?
You were deep in thought on something. What was that?
Now, as far as dedication of improvements, I'm trying to, just so we don't have, I know I ran into some, this is personal experience, I ran into some instances where the township didn't want to take over the streets after they had agreed to do it. By saying agreeing to do it, they signed the plans. And then they come back at the last moment and the streets met the requirements, design, construction requirements and everything, and they didn't want to take over the responsibility for the streets. That puts a developer in a real hard place. Kyle would know that.
Yep.
Could you get away with it?
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds
don't
like the
think
stuff
they did.
lawsuits are made on that.
If I remember right, the developer
One.
won,
I would
I would
think they
agree.
would.
but it
Yeah.
was, he had to
Fight it.
Spend money in court, yeah.
Yeah. See if we
say
want.
and it's just, once the township accepts a plan, I mean, they're pretty much locked in on it. Okay. Just make a point.
Okay.
So the next thing we wanted to have a conversation
On
with
mobile homes.
is mobile homes.
Everybody's favorite topic.
And again, I've been around here for a while, so I understand the history of the issue here in the township.
Yeah.
Mr. Rumoff.
So,
No, we don't.
unlike,
I don't think we have.
for some reason, and Rob and I we were talking about this in the office a couple weeks ago. For the life of us, we don't. Historically, mobile home parks regulations have always been in the Saldo, and usually when it's covered in the zoning ordinance, it just simply references the Saldo.
Okay.
And for the life of us, we don't have any history of why. For 30 plus years we've been there, we don't understand how it ended up there, other than it's probably remnant of before there was zoning in a lot of places, and it's just never got moved around.
Okay.
So you have mobile home park regulations in your Saldo currently. You also have standards for modular mobile home dwelling units, and you have standards for mobile home parks in your zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Scott and I have talked about this briefly, and the conversation is, is there a reason we need them in both places? Or should it only be in one or the other? That's sort of does it make sense for them to be in both places? That's before we even get to what the standards.
What would be your professional parent? What would be your recommendation? I agree kind of with one or the other, because if you have two and they conflict with each other, that is just ripe for a lawsuit. Because they'll use one and say this is the one, or whichever suits them most.
I'll let Scott answer for himself. From our perspective, it comes up so infrequently that I don't know. And from planners, we all know we haven't an opinion one way or the other, strong preference one way or the other yet. I don't know if this is
Well, I think there's a case to be made for both locations. I mean, mobile home parks as a general use would be like a zoning issue.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with
And
that.
I don't know how you can take them out of zoning.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
But there's also a lot of design elements involved with that that really
South.
don't meet the definition of the purpose of the use of the zoning. It's
Yeah.
more of design elements
Yeah, they are.
involved in a mobile home park.
So there might be a case where we need to start splitting out some of the standards here.
Yeah,
More design stuff goes in there.
like the park element, the mobile home park element in
Yeah.
Saldo, but
Things are site design related,
Yeah.
and density
Exactly,
related
exactly.
go in the zoning, but things that are construction related go in the Saldo.
Well, some of this was written when single wides were the norm. That's not the case anymore. They're all
Well,
double wide. I don't even know, do they even make them anymore? I don't think so. Maybe they do.
Well, didn't we update though, the mobile home? What did we do, just definitions as opposed to?
Yeah, we
I'm
put in
talking
the
about
definition.
the 2 years ago thing, or 3, what?
Right.
It's probably 4 now, huh? It was
Well, now it's,
before COVID.
now it's more like manufactured housing
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah.
mobile homes.
With the peaked roof and siding.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
yeah.
Just bring it in on a
two-
truck and set
two
it up.
halves.
Yeah.
Stick them together.
Yeah, modular is more normally what they're called now.
Well, there's two classifications. One is a manufactured home,
Manufactured.
which is under HUD.
okay,
It means HUD set regulations,
okay,
and those come in on wheels and are put together. Then there's a modular home, which again is manufactured,
yeah,
but those have a sticker on them that's underneath the kitchen sink. And you have to match the two halves together when you put one in. They have to be put in by a certified installer.
okay, but they're not subject to HUD, is that your point, or
No.
that?
They're technically mobile.
Now, do we capture that, or do we have to look at the,
If someone comes to me and is putting in a modular home,
yeah,
they have to have a certified installer do it.
okay,
They give me the certificate with the numbers, and that gets recorded. Now, the two-piece trailer type that come together,
the second version of what you were saying,
well,
okay,
that's regulated by DMV. You
okay,
get a title to those,
okay,
and again, you have to have the two pieces on the outside of the vehicle, or the trailer.
okay,
They each have a sticker, and they gotta match, be consecutive numbers.
okay. But you'll approve with proper planning,
Yeah.
you'll approve both kinds, HUD and
Yeah.
non-HUD.
They have to be, the modular home can go on a foundation. However, some of them do come with a manual, and then they have to be installed by the manual in terms of piers, so many feet apart, so deep,
Yeah.
and
Skirting.
Like cabin footings as opposed to.
and then the same thing with the manufactured ones, which is two trailers that they bring in together. Those have to be on piers. And it used to be that if you bought a used one, you could do what the hell you wanted with it. But now, they have to be installed by the manufacturer's requirements. And unfortunately, the state, when Mark Conti was at L&I, he had a file cabinet full of the manuals, installation manuals. So if you called up and said, I got a 1968 Marlite, he could get the manual out, copy it, and send it to me. And we knew that then the house was gonna be installed by that manual.
Okay.
He retired about 5-6 years ago, and all that's gone now.
Okay,
Now, I got a question. What do you call a house, a full-blown house that comes in like 6 big pieces? And they put it together, I mean, is that considered,
That's a modular.
is that considered a modular house?
yeah, it's built in
I
a
mean,
factory is where you're starting.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Yes.
okay, because I know a guy that has a beautiful house.
Oh,
and
they're
it's well built,
magnificent.
and, you know, I seen him putting it together. You know, shit, you know, it's a nice looking. when
And
it's
for
finished,
stability in
you know.
transit, they have, it isn't just a drywall on the inside, they have
Everything.
plywood on the inside.
Everything
You can hang a
done.
picture anywhere you want in that.
Well,
No, it's solid,
Yeah.
they changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For transport, yeah.
Yeah, I got one that was built over on Gun Club Road about 20 years ago, and when they got it delivered, and the guy couldn't wait to see it, and the drywall was falling off the walls and everything else. Now, that doesn't happen anymore.
Not anymore, okay. Okay, so back to our question.
So in your zoning ordinance, the standards in your mobile home park standards in your zoning ordinance read very similar in layout to mobile home park standards in the subdivision ordinance traditionally were.
Okay.
There's a lot of
Overlap.
overlap.
Okay,
So now we have two different models of mobile home park standards that I've shared with Scott. One of them is not a version that we wrote that basically took the older version of mobile home park standards and modernized it. Another one that sort of rewrote the whole thing from scratch, like, you know, as a new version of it.
okay.
We have not. I've shared them with Scott. I don't know. We haven't met to go through either of them yet. We're still in this conversation of where we want to put them. If you know, we can certainly go through the standards and see what they are, and then decide which ones would need to go where. If your intention is to that there be better split, I mean, I guess that's a step that we could do.
I'm at split. And I think you are too, right, Scott? What do you think? Anybody else?
Elements, Aldo, and
The use is designated in the zoning and then the design and construction.
yeah, use and definitions, and zoning, and then design. So that makes sense to me. That works better, too.
Yeah, you don't want to put the design and construction part in the zoning, because then every time that something different, you have to go in for a zoning hearing and all that.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a starting point then.
Now, just keep in mind that upon adoption, that version is that's another thing that's going to require a corresponding zoning ordinance amendment at the same time to revise that. But that's
Parcel though.
we're going to be writing this. That's
We're going to do that for another section anyway.
Yeah, on the margin, that's minor, yeah.
Yeah. So the next steps for Scott and I would be to, I guess, meet and go through that and see what to do. Which version we think, and then we then go from there and then come back to you guys with the version. Maybe my next month. I'm not sure we'll sit on.
Are you saying both versions exist in the county today?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first version is, I mean, it's very similar to probably what you have now. The other version's similar, but it's been reworked to be a little more
Current?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one, there's some things in the traditional model that, you know, might not be issues as much in current technology and current units.
Okay.
You know, some of it's there's a healthy bit of nuisance compliant stuff in them back from an era when mobile home parks had a reputation
for being a nuisance.
So one of the things I like to point out is there's a person who is on our planning commission who has told me for years now that if you want to build affordable housing in Adams County, build mobile home parks. Because from a wage perspective of county wages,
That's what you can afford.
That's
affordable based on the actual county wages earned in the county, not.
That's probably true. Yeah. Yeah, and everything's, in most counties, is becoming less affordable. As we discussed previously.
Yes.
If you go up to Carlisle, North Milton Township, they got, I forgot the name of Pine Hill Mobile Home Park out there. I think it has 600 single wides in it. Mm-hmm. And they have people, it's like a revolving door.
Yeah.
Move in.
Huntersburg has What's that one out there in Heidelberg?
North of Highlanders.
Oh,
Oh,
south of
yeah.
Heidelberg. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Yeah.
It's called,
Old Harrisburg.
I don't know what it's called, but I drove in there a couple years ago, and that was really well made.
Yeah, it's,
It is well maintained.
Well, the people own their homes.
Well, and that's that's
Yeah,
an
they just
issue with
rent-
some
they
of these,
rent the
including
lots.
the one on Gun
Well-
Club, is you got some owners and some not owners.
Right, well,
And
I've,
that mix creates challenge,
mobile homes do have a life. And there's some big ones up in Silver Spring Township. And I've been aligned for a long time in our club, not the York Springs Club, but we got called because an older couple sold their home and moved out and bought a mobile home in one of these parks. And the first big rain came along, it was like a sieve. And they didn't have the money to fix it.
Yeah.
So we helped them out, and that cost us about 12 grand to do it right. And then when winter came, they called us and said, we don't have heat. The furnace didn't go. So, I mean, them things do go kaput.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, and if they had 12 grand laying around, they probably weren't in a single wide mobile home to begin with.
The furniture number is probably 75% life of another one.
I don't know, but
They're lesser.
yeah. So, I mean,
We good for tonight? Andy? Is that what we're covering tonight? Scott?
That's what we want to cover. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's, mobile home park's really the last technical
Yeah.
section.
Okay.
After that is next steps, well, we have to do that and come back to you guys with that. After that, then it's, we have to edit everything you've talked about now.
Okay.
Come back, then we have to do the definitions section. Once that's finished,
you got a draft.
putting everything together.
Okay.
And then going from there. So
Okay, definition's probably no picnic though, right? I mean, there's a lot to that. Yeah.
it'll be, there's a reason why you'd leave that to last.
Right.
But yeah, so
Okay.
that's the next step. So
All right.
I guess we'll have to sit down and talk about when we do that. And hopefully we can get it by the next meeting, but we'll see.
There's no other new business to go over. Moving along to public comments.
That was very interesting conversations.
It's technical at times and stuff. Paul, do you have anything? Our next meeting is July 22nd. Anything else to bring before the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that.
Second.
Second one, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
What happens if somebody opposes?
I don't know.
That person
you can't go.
That's right. That person can stay.